Good morning. This is Christopher Onwasanya, President of Atlantic Waste and Power, and this is our first broadcast slash podcast. So I'm very, very excited about it. It's the first time we're doing this, and today it's titled Solar Power for Dummies. Now, that doesn't imply that people are stupid or are dummies, but what we've seen is a lot of books have been written titled, Brain Fog for Dummies, Solar Power for Dummies, Eating Food for Dummies. We figured, why not? Let's get it on the bandwagon, and let's follow the same format and record Solar Power for Dummies. So, questions. Right now, we don't have any viewers. Hopefully, as they join, they have an opportunity to ask us questions, and then we'll answer the questions. So, what is solar power? Well, Um, there are many varied answers, but I'll give you the simplest one. Solar power gives you the ability to connect to the sun. So what does that mean? Well, instead of powering your house using, say, a generator or using the grid, you can power your house from the sun. So what does that involve? Well, you need solar panels, of course. Solar panels are like the petrol pump. The panels capture electricity from the sun, and that electricity is stored in your batteries. What do the batteries do? So consider the solar panels your fuel pump. The batteries are your petrol tank. So you have your fuel pump putting fuel into your batteries. Now, when you need them, the power stored in the battery is converted from DC into AC by an inverter, which is AC is what powers your house, and then it supplies electricity to your house. So hopefully that's it in a nutshell. How long has solar been around? Solar has been around for a very, very long time. I believe the first concept of photovoltaics was developed in the 1800s. The first commercial application of photovoltaics, they were called solar batteries, was in 19 somewhere around 1955, 1956 by Bell Labs, and they were used in remote areas to power telephone switches. And from what I've heard, some of those original installations are still functioning today. Okay, solar back then was very, very expensive, so it was limited to um, high people, corporations that could afford it. So, perfect example of areas where solar power was used was in the space program. All the satellites that were launched were basically powered with solar panels. The concept of using nuclear to power satellites, while good, those things have a nasty tendency to crash once in a while. And the idea of contaminated plutonium stored in a satellite crashing into someone's house, you can imagine what the liability implications are. So they use solar panels to power satellites, and they've done that successfully since the 70s. So you still have satellites that are orbiting in space today that are powered by solar panels. That are powered by solar panels, and they've been up there for over 30 years. So the questions we get most of the time are, when it rains, would I still have electricity? The answer is actually yes. All the panels need is a little bit of light. So somewhere at about 6:30 in the morning, it's bright enough to produce electricity from your panels to charge your batteries. Are you producing maximum electricity? Of course not. So on very rainy days or very cloudy days, the output of your panels are very limited. So you're not producing enough electricity to charge your batteries, or you're consuming more than you're producing. So what do we usually suggest to our customers? Well, if you have money, buy more panels and buy more batteries. Well, 95% of our customers don't want to go through that expense. So we usually suggest to them that if they go through a day or two of extremely cloudy weather or very rainy weather, to turn everything off and just let the sun recharge the batteries. Where you don't want to do that, then turn your generator on and let the generator recharge your batteries. It's very, very important that you keep those batteries charged. So that answers the question. Does it work when it rains? The answer is absolutely yes, it does. Another question we ask is, can it power a refrigerator? Well, yes, it can. The smallest system we currently offer, which we'll discontinue very soon, is 1.5 kilowatts. And the 1.5 kilowatt system can power your fridge, your freezer, your lights, your TV, your fans without a problem. If you want to power a water pump, or as Nigerians refer to it as a pumping machine, we advise you to go 2 kilowatts or higher. Another question we get asked, can it power an AC? Absolutely. ACs are devices that convert that basically run to take the heat out of the air. Well, they take humidity out of the air. Basically, it's not really heat. They take humidity out of the air, and then they dry the air and then send out cool air. Can you run an AC? Yes. Is it advisable to run an AC on solar if you're on a very limited budget? The answer is absolutely not. And the reason for that is, to power ACs, you're going to need a whole lot more storage, which is your batteries, and you're going to need more panels. And those are the two most expensive components in any system that we build. So which other questions do we get asked again? Is it as strong as the power that comes from the grid? Well, absolutely. Actually, it is better than the power that comes from the grid. It's a pure sine wave, so you don't get all the noise you might get from the grid due to a poor transformer. It produces constant voltage. So what does that mean? It's producing about 230 volts. Our systems produce between 219 and 230. Some produce a constant 230, some produce a constant 219, some produce a constant 220. But what you have is, you have very happy equipment, like your refrigerator is running very well, it's running cooler because you're producing very clean and full voltage. In Nigeria, we've seen as little as 167 to as much as 210. At 210, the appliances are fine. Below 200, the appliances struggle a little bit. So that's the reason why you have appliances that don't last. Something else you also experience in Nigeria is, you experience those surges where you have power that exceeds what your appliances can handle. And what Nigerians have resorted to doing is putting a automatic voltage regulator in their houses. Some of the systems we have designed have built-in voltage regulators in it, so it's never an issue where you have surges or spikes. Now, we get asked, what kind of batteries do you use? Well, I'm very happy you asked that question. I'm very happy people ask that question. What is a battery? A battery is a chemical process that stores energy for later use. So in your car, your petrol tank serves that function. You go to a petrol station or a filling station, you put in petrol, and that petrol, you use that petrol when you run your engine. So the bigger your tank, the longer you can run. So back to the question you asked, why do we use what kind of batteries do we use? Our first preference are 2-volt batteries where the customer can afford it. And then our second preference after that are 6-volt batteries. We very rarely use 12-volt batteries, and when we do, we prefer the flooded batteries. On most of our applications, we like the flooded batteries, and we'll tell you why. The gel cells are very good, or the gel batteries. The reason why they are good is because you can store them anywhere, and you can store them in any orientation. You can keep them upright, you can keep them sideways, you could even keep them upside down. And the reason why you can do that is because you instead of liquid electrolyte, it's a paste, a gel that looks like toothpaste. Actually, it does look like toothpaste. It's most of them are bluish gel, and you really cannot shake them loose, and you really cannot empty them. The major disadvantage those have is you cannot overcharge them. They are very sensitive to being overcharged. As you overcharge them, that gel boils away. Eventually, you're going to get to a point where there is no longer any gel left, and that the gel is electrolyte. And once you've lost that electrolyte, you've basically destroyed the battery. So they're very sensitive to overcharging. So you have to make sure you have a charger that would not overcharge your batteries. So so the question is why do we prefer flooded batteries? Well, the downside to overcharging a flood when you overcharge a flooded battery, what happens is it gases, which your gel does also. But you could always replace the electrolyte you lost with distilled water. So as it gases, we don't advise you overcharge, but the event you have an accidental overcharge, you pour distilled water back in and you replace the electrolyte you have. Second reason why we like it also is part of the reason why people suffer battery failures is because of something called sulfation. Batteries have to be properly charged every day. What happens is, as the battery goes through a charge and discharge cycle, there is buildup at the bottom of the plates. The battery is comprised of lead plates. So there are lead plates inside your battery. Your electrolyte goes through the positive and negative end, and that's how it produces electricity. So as this happens, you have some sediments that fall off and they accumulate at the bottom of the battery. Eventually, as this continues to happen, it prevents your battery from performing the function which is designed to, which is going from one end to the other. So on our flooded batteries, we can do what is called a desulfation. And desulfation is basically an overcharge of the battery. Remember earlier I told you you couldn't overcharge the batteries, especially on the gel? Well, you can overcharge flooded batteries. And when you overcharge them, you're actually boiling them. And the overcharge is for about anywhere between 4 and 6 hours. And what happens is you hope that enough, it gets the overcharge is strong enough that it breaks up the sulfates that have built up at the bottom of the plates, and your battery could start performing well again. So we advise our customers that once every month to run a sulfation cycle on their battery to keep the battery in proper shape. Now, the other question we get asked is solar is very expensive. Why should I buy it? Well, you know something? You are absolutely correct. It's very expensive. But let's look at the altruistic part of it first, and then we'll discuss the economics part of it. One, if your alternative is to run a generator, think about the noise pollution. Also, think about the fuel consumption, and the biggest one is the pollution that comes from it. In addition, there are dangers. If you read the news in Nigeria, almost every other day, you hear of people who are dying from carbon monoxide asphyxiation or carbon monoxide poisoning. They left the generator running all night in an enclosed area, and the fumes killed them. You've heard entire families getting wiped out. The other part of it that people don't see is it settles in your lungs. All the soot settles in your lungs, and we're seeing an increased incidence of lung cancer in Nigeria. So you can play a part in reducing that. And one thing also is they are really dangerous. We've seen people who have very poor practices where they fuel a generator while it's running, and gasoline is very, very flammable. All it needs is a little spark, a little heat, and it catches on fire. And we had a prospect who suffered burns over 75% of his body. He spent over $500,000, and he still isn't anywhere near where he should be. So he saved himself a little bit of money by buying a gasoline generator, but now he's going to wind up spending over $1 million to compensate for that little mistake he made. So now let's talk about the economics of a generator versus a solar installation. Yes, upfront you're spending 10, 15, 20 times the cost of a generator. So a better pass might not cost you about 25, 30,000 naira, which is really nothing. You connect some wires, you don't necessarily do a fantastic job. You put fuel in it every day and you run and you don't think anything about it. But what does it cost you every day to run? So when you add the cost of that generator plus your daily fuel costs, multiply that by 365, that number becomes big. Now, if you have a more permanent installation, so people have like bigger diesel generators, I've had customers who tell me they spend as little as 10,000 a week to customers who spend 100,000 a week. A customer spending 100,000 a week is spending 5.2 million naira a year. Okay, for that kind of money, they add another million or two to it. They have a solar installation that provides them 24 hours power instead of 6 to 7 hours power or 10 hours power. There is no noise, there's no pollution, and there's really no maintenance except adding distilled water to the batteries once every 3 months and then cleaning the panels, when they're dirty. So that's basically all there is to it. So yes, upfront it doesn't cost you anything to get the generator, but the daily cost of running it just gets prohibitive. And then you have to add the fact that you need to do maintenance. You have to bring that generator down to break it, for them to do maintenance. And then after, if you follow the proper schedule, every 500 hours or 300 hours, I don't really know what the schedule is, that engine has to be broken down if it's a diesel and overhauled. So those are costs that you will never see in solar. You pay one time and you're done. The other question we get asked again is how does it compare to an inverter? So in Nigeria, they have inverters. And what are inverters? Inverters are basically UPSs. A UPS is an uninterruptible power supply. Um, they are similar in function, but in terms of construction, they do vary. So some inverters, well, most inverters, I believe, could be high frequency units because they don't really seem to weigh that much, except the really bigger ones. When you go over a certain kilowatt kVA, they weigh a lot. So those are probably low frequency inverters. When you take a look at an inverter, you see they're about something this big, and people usually put them on top of their batteries. What is the difference between that and our system that's a little bigger? Well, the major difference is one, ours is designed as a permanent backup, not a temporary backup. So it can run for extended periods of time because one, the circuit boards are thicker. They have cooling fans built into them, so they are designed um, they are designed with the intent that you can run them for extended periods of time. Two, this is the big one. If you have no NEPA and you have no generator, your inverter is totally useless to you. So ours does not require a generator unless you choose to buy a minimal system and you go through 2 or 3 cloudy days, then a generator, it becomes necessary to use a generator. But in Africa, we have an abundance of sunshine, so it's very rare that you go through an entire day that's cloudy. Um, our system will charge using our system will charge using solar alone. We also will charge using solar, um, NEPA, and a generator. So that's the primary difference between them and us. Okay, so what is the last question I could think of? Can it power air conditioning? Yes, I think I answered that. Can it power a fridge and freezer? Yes, I think I answered that. Does it, what's the difference between it and an inverter? I think I answered that. How does it work? I think we answered that as well. We'll be doing this again. Next week, we'll be in Nigeria doing installation. So hopefully we'll do this from one of our installation locations if we have high enough internet access. Okay, so thank you so much for listening to our video today, and thank you for the questions. We look forward to having this happen again next week.